In the 1930s, New York architect Alfred Butz, yes, that's his real name, set out to create a tabletop game similar to anagrams or crosswords. He wrote a paper classifying tabletop games into a few different categories, and came to realize that pre-existing word games would be more fun if they utilized natural language letter distributions. He calculated the frequencies of each letter of the alphabet using the front pages of newspapers. The concept developed into a game he called ᴑɪʟᴘ, in which players would draw 9 cardboard tiles at random from a set of 100 and construct words on a crossword-like grid. This version didn't feature a board yet. After failing to sell the game to various manufacturers, Butz resorted to marketing it on the street by himself for about 7 years. In 1938, he tweaked some of ᴑɪʟᴘ's rules, added a 15x15 playing board with score modifiers, and began selling a new version titled Crisscross Words. It caught the attention of local social worker James Bruneau, who liked the game so much that he and his wife ended up converting a former schoolhouse into a factory to manufacture the game. He also changed the name to Scrabble because to scrabble means to scratch or grope frantically, and I guess when you play, everyone's sort of scrabbling to put words down. Anyway, the rights were passed between progressively bigger and bigger manufacturers until 1989, when it was purchased by Hasbro, who still owns it to this day. But that's just a story in North America. Outside the US and Canada, Scrabble is manufactured by Mattel, which markets the game in 130 different countries in roughly 30 distinct languages. Basically, I found out this fact a couple of months ago and I was upset to see that it's pretty difficult to find information on the majority of these different language editions. In this video, I want to show you some of the more interesting language editions of Scrabble and what makes them unique, as well as some other unofficial clones that feature their own spin on the game. Scrabble is a written word game, so when I say different languages, what I really mean is different writing systems. For this video, I'll be using Peter T. Daniels' system of classification, which breaks down every natural writing system into 5 main categories. Officially branded Scrabble language editions only inhabit 2 categories, but as you'll see, the rabbit hole goes much, much deeper. An alphabet is when a language uses a set of letters to represent individual consonant and vowel sounds. You have to be able to express every phoneme spoken in your language using only the graphemes in your alphabet. For example, in English, k, a, and t are all easily represented by a single letter. There's no single letter for the long E sound, but multiple letters can be strung together to achieve the pronunciation. All Romance languages are alphabetic, which broadly speaking works well for a game like Scrabble because of fusional qualities that allow for words to be lengthened or pluralized in convenient ways. I'm assuming the majority of the audience is most familiar with the original English version of the game. It's an interesting question as to why a game like Scrabble was originally flavored in English. Butz's preferred language doesn't have the most root words by far. It's also on the lower end of letter counts. Ultimately, Scrabble maintained its podium stance through the mid-century mass market, appealing to the American nuclear family household to a greater effect than something like Anagrams. Butz's previously mentioned frequency calculations were important because Scrabble was originally intended to be played without consulting a dictionary. Doing so in the midst of your play is disallowed. This means players must rely on memory and conversational word forms to craft plays, which are better nurtured by a natural language corpus rather than some sort of alphabetic word book. Hence why 12% of all the tiles are just E. Before making this video, English was the only language I'd ever played Scrabble in. It's undoubtedly the version that's undergone the most research and analysis. With 100 tiles, 26 letter sorts, and 225 squares to arrange on, there's a lot of interesting wordplay that can be achieved. The highest scoring play in an English Scrabble tournament game was made by a Karl Koschna in 1982 when he played Kha'Zix for 392 points. The most points possibly achievable for one play can't really be determined, but the best so far was found by Dave Wood on Scrabulizer.com. If you're using the official NASPA tournament dictionary, and your board looks like this, and your rack looks like this, you can play ᴑɪʟᴜᴊᴇᴜᴜ for a total of 1,780 points. A score as high as 2,044 could potentially be earned using a different dictionary. However, these plays are only theoretical and highly unlikely to ever opportunize in natural play. Lots of other fun theoretical configurations can be found if you look around hard enough. The famous Sator square is actually possible to construct on a Scrabble board through a series of very particular but entirely legal plays. Here's another weird configuration that uses ᴑɪʟᴜᴜᴜ. By the way, naughty words have pretty much always been allowed for casual play in English, and I know this because in 2008, a mother in Ireland went to the press after her son was playing Scrabble on his DS, and the computer proceeded to play tits and fuckers back to back. Spanish versions of the game have been around since at least 1978. Internationally, they use these 100 tiles. Like English, accent marks are disregarded except for the ñ. K and W tiles are excluded since these letters are only used in loanwords. Blanks can't be used to represent them either, so you could never play something like ᴘ괟ᴜ or sandwich. You'll also notice the 2-letter tiles. The double L, double R, and CH digraphs were considered individual letters in the Spanish alphabet until 2010. Playing consecutive L's, R's, or C's and H's in place of these tiles is not allowed. Within the US, a different Spanish version is sold called Scrabble Edición en Español that uses these 103 tiles. This edition does include K and W tiles, but excludes CH. There was also a version sold in Latin America called Scrabble that uses these 108 tiles. French Scrabble is arguably more popular than the English edition from a competitive standpoint. Competitive French Scrabble is played in 2 different forms: match play and duplicate. A traditional tournament match is played between 2 players with a 25-minute time limit, but duplicate Scrabble involves an unlimited number of players given the same board and letters. They must play the highest scoring word they can find turn after turn. The French World Scrabble Championships expands these into 4 different tournaments with 6 different age groups. It's held each year in a different francophone country, the first and largest international tournament centered around the game. There's an international federation for francophone Scrabble, and a whole separate one just exclusive to France. You may have heard of Nigel Richards, a renowned Scrabble player who has won dozens of international championships in 3 different languages, including 5 different French titles despite not actually speaking French. He reportedly spent 9 weeks memorizing the French dictionary in its entirety to accomplish this. The modern 102-tile French edition really doesn't come with any sort of magical orthographical pheromones, but there are a few characteristics of the French language that may make the game more strategic and complex. French verb conjugation vastly increases the dictionary length and allows for greater flexibility in sequential plays. Also, due to differing rules of capitalization, the French word list allows for a variety of proper nouns not present in other versions, such as days of the week, month names, geographic terms, languages, nationalities, and religions. Scrabble has also been adopted as a language learning tool in many French school curricula stemming from the 80s and 90s, so the average French citizen may have a deeper appreciation for and history with the game. Lastly, I'd like to show you singer Pape Diouf performing a song entirely about the game for the 2008 championships in Senegal.
Le Sénégal, terre de Scrabble, va défendre, c'est toi qui.
Scrabble is less popular in Germany for somewhat intuitive reasons. The game has a prolonged history of changing tile distributions and rule modifications since it was introduced in the 1950s, attempting to make the oddities of German orthography squeeze into the confines of Alfred Butz's design. The first sets were produced by Bavarian toy manufacturer ᴘʟᴜᴄᴛ and featured these 100 tiles. Sometime later, Socho and Writer sold a set with 3 Zs. Some editions have 119 tiles, with players holding 8 tiles at a time on their rack. Some editions have an SHIT tile, while other editions just have more S's and assume players will play 2 at a time in place of the character. Current editions use these 102 tiles, only 1 Z. In 2018, Mattel exemplified their desperation in the German market by rolling out a strange ad campaign con social prank for the game's 70th anniversary that rebranded Scrabble as Buchstaben YOLO.
Zieh dir deine heraus, wilde Worte, schnapp die Punkte, du wirst Barbe im Haus. Aber Mutti kombiniert und legt dann noch einen drauf. Hier ein Tipp von MC Fitti.
Du hast Swag, kleine Maus. 14 Punkte, fette Props.
I find it especially strange that this stunt was pulled in Germany when most of these slang words originated from or were at least highly popularized in America. This edition was never sold publicly, but according to eBay, several real box sets were manufactured for reasons I can't really determine. In the 80s, there was an Italian clone called Scrabble, but really it's a completely different game. With up to 6 players, you play words based on a set category and you can modify pre-placed tiles to create anagrams. There's a separate variant that's been historically more popular than Scrabble in Italy called ᴍᴜ괱. It's played on a 17x17 board with 130 tiles. The blank tiles have beetles on them, it's pretty swag. In Italy, it's just like a try not to play Scrabble normally challenge. Even the official Mattel set implements a special rule in which a player gets to block the other player from exchanging tiles and instead just make them skip their turn. Each player can only do this once per game though. What about Scrabble in dead Italian languages? A Latin edition was created in conjunction with scholars from the University of Cambridge in 2005-ish. Classical literature expert Michael Hendry explains that Latin's unique inflectional endings may make gameplay in the language additionally strategic, similar to French. Sweden's Scrabble clone has its own historical saga. Alphabet was sold in place of Scrabble for about 4 decades in both Sweden and Finland until the 1990s when Mattel gobbled up the license. But the original manufacturers retained the rights to the Alphabet name and continues to sell the game to this day with some zealous rule changes, like having a 17x17 board, 20 more tiles, quadruple bonuses, and directionally changing tiles. With Iceland, it was the inverse. Hrafla was brought about through online discourse to improve the letter distribution used in Icelandic sets prior to 2016. The changes Hrafla introduced were seemingly implemented into modern Mattel distributions. Despite less than 1% of the population in Ireland actually speaking Irish on a regular basis, and much less in Northern Ireland, Scrabble as ghÉilge has been sold since the 2010s. It's a purpose-driven product meant to incite interest in the language to slow its rate of extinction. Additionally, a Scottish Gaelic set was announced just last year. Irish Gaelic and Scottish Gaelic are really not that similar, but if you ever woke up in a random sheep-filled countryside and all you had to determine which country you were in was a game of Scrabble, you'll know you're in Ireland if the accents slant right and Scotland if they slant left. Welsh is another language that considers certain digraphs to be individual letters. There's 7 of them. You can't play any of these letter pairs using individual tiles also. Strange game. I was able to find small details about Scrabble communities in Slovakia and Slovenia. Slovak and Slovenian might sound like they'd be very similar languages, but they actually originate from entirely different families. Slovak is much more similar to Czech, and their letter distributions are somewhat analogous. Both of these sets exclude digraph tiles and Q. Prior to an official Czech set being created in 1993, Czech games that were kind of similar but also kind of different included Crisscross Classic and Křižovky. Okay, speed round. Afrikaans has a clone called Wordkrabbel. Catalan sets have this tile to differentiate from the geminated double L. Greek has a clone called Orizontia Catheta, and in my opinion, this language has some of the coolest lettering for a game like this. Looks like something you'd see in Plato's journal. Hungarian is one of the only languages in the world with a trigraph letter, but it's excluded from Hungarian Scrabble because it's really rare and also Mattel is a pussy. Poland has a clone of Alphabet called Skriba, so it's like a clone of Scrabble, Scrabbleception, Scrabble Matrix, yada yada yada. Indonesian has a clone called Scrabble. Malay has a clone called Sahiba, which is available in the Latin script called Rumi, as well as the alternative Arabic-based script called Jawi. More on that later. Turkish has tiles for the dotted and dotless I. It's pretty cool, I guess. Abjads are alphabets that only have letters for consonants. Vowel characters are left out to be inferred by the reader through context. Hebrew and Arabic are the 2 main abjads used today, and the 2 last official Scrabble language editions I have for you. The first thing to note is that these languages are written right to left. But of course, that doesn't really change much for a game in which tiles occupy all 4 of the cardinal directions along a grid. Hebrew Scrabble has been sold by at least 3 different companies in North America and the UK, but a clone called Blanco appears to be more popular within Israel. A total of 5 Hebrew letters are formed differently when they appear at the end of a word. These forms are not included in modern Hebrew tile distributions, so normal forms are accepted in their place. Arabic sets were unusually difficult to research. There only appears to be one edition sold in select countries like Oman. Due to Arabic's cursive style, letters may be written in initial, medial, or final forms depending on their context. Mattel's Arabic Scrabble uses the letters isolated or standalone forms on tiles, which is how you might see them on signage or in an acronym. Also keep an eye out for the aforementioned Jawi edition of Sahiba. Sahiba is very intriguing because it supposedly allows play in 2 different languages simultaneously. I'm led to believe a game can be structured in which one player plays words in Bahasa Melayu while the other plays words in Standard Arabic. It's time to venture into the black market of board games. Even in countries with name brand Scrabble sets, cardboard copycats perk up. So of course alternatives would arise to fill the niche in virgin territories. In northeastern Eurasia, you can buy a sleek black set called ʟɪＲդꜱ with 125 tiles. I'm led to believe Mattel no longer sells any official Russian sets because of the Ukrainian war sanctions. Speaking of Ukraine, certain ʟɪRդꜱ boxes will list Ukrainian as a playable language because it's a different language from a real country, despite what the Russian government spouts. A tile you'll never find in these sets, however, is one that looks like this. This is the Cyrillic character ge, or he, a letter that Soviet reformers tried to eliminate from languages like Ukrainian and Belarusian in the 1930s to make them look more Russian. But it never really went out of style, and you can still enjoy playing with this tile in various online Ukrainian Scrabble games today. Armenian has a big version called Bar Kag, and has at least 2 more clones that I definitely need more research on. A Bikol edition called Damanin Tataraman was developed for a mother tongue conference during the pandemic. Here's a baby playing Breton Scrabble in France. Moving on. A Tereo or Maori clone called Kupu Tupu is sold at this library in New Zealand. It's made from local New Zealand materials like rimu wood, and the creators claim its goal is to sort of extract the subconscious Tereo knowledge from players. This Tagalog version, called Salitan, wins the award for most closely resembling a box of chicken and a biscuit. As we dig deeper into the cardboard rabbit hole, however, we must spend some time broaching the remaining major writing systems. Abjads fall somewhere between alphabets and abjads. They feature letters for vowels and consonants, as well as consonant-vowel pairs. Another way to describe this concept is that letters in abjads have inherent vowels. You can break down a letter into a primary consonant and an additional vowel marking. Almost all abjads come from India and Southeast Asia, as well as a few scripts from Ethiopia. Segmental writing systems like Devanagari can be wielded in a Scrabble-adjacent format by printing each syllable combination on its own tile. This is the basis behind Aksharat, a Hindi word game designed primarily as an education tool by then undergraduate Manoj Dhariwal. Using syllable tiles known as Akshara, players must form words in crisscross fashion along a 13x13 board. Hindi exhibits such notoriously anti-Scrabble behavior that Aksharat's publishing brand claims it to be the
first word game for Indian languages.
You might have seen this as a Nokia game. It was popular on there for a while. Mad Rat Games also claims Aksharat is available in Tamil, another notable abogida. How would Tamil work with otherwise traditional Scrabble rules? Well, you could play this oblong variant called Sorkalam that creatively tackles the syllable issue by including additional transparent vowels to be placed on top of consonant tiles. Or you could try this version that uses 1,000 tiles on a 45x45 board. This is an idea put forth by the now defunct Scrabble 3D forums. When your language uses exclusively consonant-vowel pairs, it's known as a syllabary. Japanese is the most widely known syllabary in the world, but only 2 of its 3 writing systems really classify as such, those being hiragana and katakana. In typical Japanese fashion, the best attempt to emulate the novelty of Scrabble with Japanese orthography is a kawaii digitized version called Mojibatan. Traditional Scrabble-like board games fully in Japanese seem to be unpopular, but Latin letters in conjunction with the hyphen tile can be used to play the game in Romaji, or Romanized Japanese. Chinese needs the biggest handicap. Language-based board games just aren't really as prevalent in China, mostly because of the whole one character equals an entire word thing that muddles the logic. If you really want to make Mandarin, or Hanzi as its writing system is sometimes known, work in some form or another, you have two different options. The first is Juyin, also known as Bopomofo. Juyin is a transliteration system for Chinese characters mostly used for typing purposes in Taiwan. It consists of 37 characters and 5 tone marks, which together can transcribe all possible sounds in Mandarin Chinese, serving a very similar purpose as something like hiragana in Japanese. Write these characters on tiny wooden tiles using a distribution kind of like this, and you're all set. The second would be pinyin. Described as the Chinese phonetic alphabet, pinyin is the most common romanization system for standard Chinese. Syllables are constructed with consonant-vowel pairs plus one of 5 diacritic tone markers. Including all possible vowel tones would require upwards of 90 individual tiles, let alone a properly apportioned distribution. An iPad app called Pinyin Pal gave this a run for its money by excluding all tone marks and featuring a character toggle button. Pinyin Pal was devised by Chinese-American author and physician Adeline Yan Ma. This is Dr. Yan Ma showing Pinyin Pal to 108-year-old Zhu Yuguang, the creator of modern Hanyu Pinyin. Just to reiterate, this guy invented the entire way we communicate Chinese words outside of China. Without his work, I wouldn't even know how to pronounce his name. Korean doesn't really fit into any aforementioned category. Its writing system, Hangul, is sometimes called a syllabic alphabet because it involves building up syllable blocks from smaller letters along a grid. The closest Korean alternative I could find is a syllable construction game called Rayon. If I knew what the hell Rummikub was, I would probably say it plays similar, but with Hangul characters instead of numbers. Sure, you could just use a romanized spelling method and slap some Latin letters on there, but there's really no standardized romanization system for Korean, meaning a tile distribution wouldn't be obtainable, let alone a dictionary. Lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the dozens of other regional languages that can be Frankenstein together from pre-existing editions tiles. This includes Bambara, Basque, Cornish, Dakhel, Dakota, Galician, Gwich'in, Haitian Creole, Hausa, Hawaiian, Igbo, Nuxalk, Occitan, Persian, Cyrillic Serbian, Tswana, and Tuvan. Conlangs, or languages constructed for artificial purposes, have found a vibrant home in Scrabble as well. An Esperanto edition called Scrabble has been around on the internet for a while until 2017 when physical sets were sold somewhere. A tutorial on how to play 160-tile Lojban Scrabble can be found on the official Lojban wiki. This tile count can be decreased by separating the apostrophe out onto its own tile, however. Searching leettiles.com on the Wayback Machine documents a webpage dedicated to selling and tutorializing a Leet edition. Leet, or Leet Speak, is an English cipher system with roots to internet hacking that uses alternative letter representations like numbers. The set was aptly colored and featured tiles for 0, 1, 3, 4, and 7. On the topic of numbered tiles, several math-based Scrabble variations have been experimented with for the past decade. In the game Equate, the goal is for players to place down digits or operations that complete valid equations along both directions. This is a dubiously difficult spin on the classic game, definitely more of a nerdy classroom novelty. Speaking of nerds, does your favorite sci-fi media franchise feature a robust constructed language for one of its quasi-human species? Well, a Scrabble set is bound to arise for it. In 2022, a Star Wars tie-in edition was released that featured the galactic basic character for each letter. For Star Trek, you can just print your own Klingon tiles. Apparently it works with the Latin letters as well as the Peak Cod script. Still waiting on some sort of Tolkienian edition, however. There's like 3 different versions of Harry Potter Scrabble in multiple different languages. Just wanted to throw that out there. The snitch on the blank tiles is kind of cool, but like, what are we doing here? Harry Potter wouldn't give a damn about a muggle game like Scrabble. They literally play a game called Wizard Chess. How many people under the age of 50 would actually care to sit down to play a physical game of Scrabble these days? And how greatly would that number be impacted if MC Fitty instant transmissioned in front of them and dabbed? I'm certainly not here to proselytize you into deleting TikTok in favor of spending your time playing brick and mortar board games. However, I find it significant that in every language in which Scrabble could reasonably be materialized, there exists a vibrant community. Maybe one day, when tiny gray aliens finally touch down on planet Earth, we can share a cup of silicon coffee over a game of Zeta Reticuli Scrabble. Hopefully we don't get the aliens from Arrival though, because you can't really play a board game when time is a circle. Also, they couldn't even hold the tiles in their bony heptapod fingers. Until then, this game is a lot more tolerable when played digitally, whether through Words with Friends or your DS or your grandma's iPad. Originally, I wrote some small JavaScript animations for the visuals in this video, but once I had all the tile sets and word lists and fonts together, I fleshed it out into a full web game with some unique language varieties. You can play it through the link in the description. I'm cramming it full of yummy tile distributions as we speak though, so it definitely will glitch out. Just keep that in mind.